And I have a question for you, Mr. Baijal. You have worked in the government for long, and you've been in Delhi and also heading the TRI. So there must have been many times in this country, we read it all the time in the newspapers, that politicians and senior government officials, they cross the barrier of ethics, which sometimes has the direct impact on the working, on the profitability of the corporates. Would you like to share some examples that you would have faced in real life, and how did you handle it? And now, a few years later, what do you think? How would you have handled it now?
Out of 41 years of my government service, for 33 years I was involved in jobs which meant change, and which meant that either you do reforms or you go to another route, or you do privatization, or in the power sector you bring in private companies. So there were lots of private firms which are involved, and obviously with these huge private firms there were huge pressures. So two things. One, people think that if there is privatization and reforms, then things will improve. But they need not. They need not improve. As a matter of fact, privatization and reform can bring in more corruption, and that's why you have invented this term, crony capitalism. And there are enormous amount of pressures. Now, if I'm very sure that if I succumb to those pressures, nothing will happen to me, I may succumb. But if I'm sure that I'll be penalized, then I will not succumb. And if I have any ethics in me, perhaps I will not go by the traditional meaning of punishment, which is through laws, but punishing yourself. And I think that has been a very major thing. And I have written about any number of instances in my e-book, and it will shortly be followed by hard copies. And if I start narrating instances, we will not close this session.
Thank you so much. And yes, your ebook is really doing waves, and newspapers are covering it so extensively. If I were to ask you the same question, and many of my students know about various things that have happened in your career, because you are from Karnataka and they've been reading about it, would there be an example which you would like to share with our students? How would you have handled the situation when the politicians or senior bureaucrats cross this line of ethics?
You see, as I was just pointing out, in ethics, in questions relating to ethics, your own value system and your own judgments come into play. And in government, of course, there are conduct rules, there are laws which you follow. We take an oath on entering the service to protect the Constitution and abide by it. So you follow all that. You work within a given framework. The question is, how do you deal with a situation where you have, you asked about how do you deal with politicians, personally I can say that I have never had any problem with the politicians, because what happens in our service is, very soon you are pigeonholed and known. Whichever department or place you go to, your reputation precedes you. So the politicians, if they know that you are not going to play ball with you, they get you transferred. Now, if you are prepared to pay the price of transfer, and my children lost a year each because of an unseasonal transfer from here to Delhi, but that's okay. It's all a question of what price you are prepared to pay. So I have not had a problem with the politicians, I would say.
Can I add a sentence? I don't think you have been in posts where you could not be transferred. The law said that you could not be transferred. And then there are very big problems which I have written, because on the other side, was 10,000 crores. That has just been, that newspapers have come out that in 2G, 10,000 crores have been hawalad, and they have traced the route. Now, on one side was a silly bureaucrat saying that, no, I won't do this, I've never done this in my life, and people knew. And on the other side was 10,000 crores, and I paid for it.
See, though, in state government, you do not deal with the amounts which you deal with in Government of India. Now, for example, here, there was a question of privatizing the Bangalore water supply system. And I was then Principal Secretary Finance, and the file came to me because ultimately privatization of something like the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board is a financial matter at the end of it. And by then one had been reading about the experience of countries which had privatized water supply. Britain was one, New Zealand was one, some Latin American countries were also there, especially the Latin American countries, because their example is more akin to our situation. So I was not given to writing long notes, but this was an unusually long note in which case I argued against privatization of water, especially in a poor country like ours. Whatever one might say, the theory that, well, God made water, but he did not lay down the water pipes, so you have to pay for the appropriate price for water supply, etc. The World Bank philosophy, all of you know that. But I argued against privatization, and it was a very strong note. And the problem was that the then authorities in the government had been bribed by the two foreign companies. One was French, one was British. So the pressure was as much as it is there in any post. But fortunately, I was transferred. But the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board has not yet been privatized even after so many years.